Salve Latin 2 students, welcome back. Hope you guys had a good weekend, and we are here at a new week, and I wanted to start the next chapter, chapter 35 with you. This will be a big chapter for us. These are the words that are, we're still dealing with comparison, which I told you was kind of a big topic, which we spend several chapters on. This is probably the biggest chapter within that section, and this deals with the words that are very irregular as far as how they make their positive comparisons and superlatives, but I'll work with you guys a lot on it. Today I thought I would just ease you into the vocab. Now, this chapter is kind of a big vocab chapter. If you look at the actual technical vocab of the chapter, it seems very short, but that's because there's a lot of words to learn in the chapter itself, right? All these comparatives and superlatives in this chapter, they don't really look like the positive at all, so essentially you have to learn these words. So that's why the vocab section looks kind of big this time, is because a lot of these words are from the chapter, but I put them into your vocab so you could study them. This is the Quizlet set, and I've already shared this with you on our Quizlet class page. So you can go there right now today and start learning and practicing these. The sooner the better, since it's kind of a big vocab chapter for you. Okay. Excuse me for these sounds. Just muting some things for you. Okay, so I'm going to go over these words today. I'm just going to give you a derivative or so on each one. Most of them will have derivatives. There might be one or two that don't. I'll talk about that. Some of the words we'll kind of take together because they have similar derivatives because they're related to each other. So I'm not really going to explain how these words work grammatically today. Some of these words are connected to each other. For example, these first two words are connected to each other, but I'll say that tomorrow when I'm explaining the grammar and how these words all work, and I'll give you some more details in the notes, okay? The first word is melior, melius, meaning better. Now, if a word ends in eor or eus or something looks like it, you know it's probably comparative, and that's what this word is. But again, I'll explain more tomorrow. A derivative of this, melior or melius, better, would be the word ameliorate in English. I don't know if you've used that word before, but if you haven't, if you ameliorate something, it means you're trying to make it better. Ameliorate means to improve upon something, right? The next word is optimus haum, which is best or very good, and this would be a superlative word. Again, it doesn't look like a normal superlative with the isimus ending because it's regular. A lot of these are like that. This is comparative, this is superlative, this is comparative, this is superlative, but I'm just giving them all to you here so you have them in your Quizlet and can be studying. A derivative for optimus, excuse me, the best would be like optimal. Something's optimal means I think it's absolutely very, very good. It's the very best you can do. Also, some of you maybe Transformers fans, you might know Optimus Prime, right? The one of the Transformers. It's kind of interesting how they use this word for his name. The next word is peor, peus. Now, the reason these have two forms, by the way, is because peor is the masculine feminine, peus is the neuter. Same thing here, masculine feminine and neuter. These are adjectives mostly in this chapter. So peor means worse, worse. Now what's a derivative here? Well, that I turns into a J in English, and we get the word pejorative from this. If you give something a pejorative name or pejorative term for something, it's a name that's meant to like make it sound worse or to belittle something, to make it sound bad, essentially. So a name that makes something sound not as good as it is or worse is a pejorative, okay? But it's a J in English. The next word is pessimus haum, which means worst or very bad. This is a superlative form. And you probably see a derivative here, worst. This would be a pessimist is a derivative here, right? A pessimist is always thinking the worst, aren't they? They're not thinking the best. The cup's always half empty, and they're thinking the worst about things. Pessimism, pessimist would come from this. The next word is maior, maius, which means greater. This word's comparative as an adjective. And if you turn that into a J, which is what it does in English, we would get the word major coming from this, major or majority, right? Majority means kind of the greater of the two sides in some sort of debate or numbers, right? So majority and major come from this. The next word is a superlative, maximus haum, which means greatest or very great, maximus. And you probably see a derivative from this, but just in case you don't, you might get the word from this like maximum. That's the highest, the highest limit of something, right? Maximum or maximize would be another derivative here. The next word is minor, minus, and this is the same thing where it's comparative masculine, feminine, comparative neuter, and it means smaller. I'll go to the grammar of this tomorrow, but minor, minus, a derivative from this, you can almost see it right there, is minor. Minor means like the lesser of two things, right? Major versus minor. So minor comes from this. Also the word minus, like one word minus this word comes from this as well. The next word is minimus aum, which is actually a superlative. It's an irregular superlative, minimus. It means small, very small, excuse me, or smallest. And a derivative here would be like minimize. If you minimize something, you try to make it seem very, very small. Minimize or minimal would also come from this. The next one is plures plura, which means more. And this word, the reason it looks a little bit different, it's still masculine, feminine, and neuter, but this word is only plural because the word more can only be plural. Again, I'll go into more detail on this word tomorrow in the grammar part of it, but just know that's why it looks a little bit different. And a word from this would be plural. Plural comes from this, which is a word we use a lot in Latin. The next word would kind of be related to it, plurimus which means most. And this word is superlative, whereas this one's comparative. And essentially the derivatives here would be the same for pluris and plurimus because they're so close to each other. So plural or plurality would be a derivative. By the way, do you know the difference between a plurality and a majority? When I've asked students in school what's the difference, a lot of them don't really know. A lot of people know the word majority, of course. That means like if you got 100 people, a majority means more than half of them. So 51 out of 100 people would be a majority, but 50 would not, right? Plurality means when you have the highest number of something, but not necessarily over half. So let's say people were voting for a governmental office and there was maybe 3 candidates instead of 2, and one person got 40% and the other 2 people got 30%. Well, that 40% would be considered a plurality. It's not a majority, it's not over half, but it is the highest number of those 3 numbers. So that's what plurality means and how it's a little bit different from a majority. Kind of a good word to learn from that here. Okay, pushing on to the next one, exterior exterius. This one is also masculine, feminine, neuter, and it means outer. This one pretty much is a direct English word, right? Exterior is a word we get from this. Exterior of your house means the outer part of it, right? And then extremus means the outermost or farthest or end of something or last. And extremus, you probably see a derivative here, would be extreme, or extremity would be another derivative there, right? Your extremities, like on your body, usually we mean like the ends of your body. So like your fingers and your toes and things like that are called your extremities. The next word here is inferior, inferius, which means lower. This is also a comparative word. And again, the English word here pretty much jumps right off. The derivative is inferior. Inferior means when you think something's kind of lower, it's not as good as something else. Inferior or inferiority would be the noun form of that. The next word is infimus which is a superlative form actually, but it's irregular. Infimus and this would mean the lowest. It's a superlative there, or the bottom of something. Now the next one is actually emus. These two, I just want to point out, emus is an alternate form of infimus. So these two are almost the same word essentially. And again, we'll talk about that more this chapter, but just know that these are very connected. That's why they mean the exact same thing. I don't know if we have any great derivatives for either of these when I'm looking at them, infimus or emus. Nothing pops to mind that we would use a lot for there, so we can leave emus blank. The next word is interior, interius, and this would be inner, right? Inner, as opposed to exterior a minute ago, outer. Interior, and we of course see the English word interior will be a derivative here from this word. Interior means the inner part of something. The superlative of that word would be intimus, which means inmost, inmost. And a word that comes from this might be intimate. Your intimate thoughts are the ones that are kind of inside. You don't always necessarily share with everyone else, right? Your intimate things. If you're in the department store or something, you see you're in the intimate section, it kind of usually means you're like underwear and things like that that are on it, under your clothes and close to your body, right? As opposed to your outerwear, which is like your clothing on the outside. So there's a couple words from intimus. Prior is the next one here, prior prius, which means former or earlier. And a derivative here from prior prius would actually be the word prior, which is just pronounced differently, but it's spelled exactly the same. Primus would be the next word here, which means first or foremost. And a derivative here would be like prime would be a word coming from this, and primary. This word you've actually had before back when we did numbers. This was the same as the ordinal number for 1, primus. So this word is actually a word we've seen before, so it shouldn't be as hard for you. The next word is superior, superius, higher is the word here. So if something's superior, that's a derivative, right? Superior means it's higher than something else. Superior, it's better, it's higher, is the derivative there. And then the next step up is sumus, which means the highest of. That's actually a superlative word there. A word you might get from sumus would be like summit, like the top of a mountain is summit, right? What sumus comes from. Some of you who did the national Latin exam, you all did the national Latin exam, but the highest award is called the summa cum laude, right? Because it's the with highest praise. The next word is ulterior, ulterius, farther, farther. Now for this word ulterior, that's actually an English word also, ulterior. We don't use it that much, but it is used in a specific phrase sometimes, which is ulterior motive. So if someone has an ulterior motive, you guys have probably heard that before, but it means you think someone is, what they're saying isn't exactly what they mean. They have something else they're trying to hide that's their motive for something. So ulterior means they have a farther motive beyond what they're actually telling and sharing with you. But besides that, you don't use the word ulterior very much in English. It's weird. Some phrases in English just kind of retain archaic words, but you never hear those words anymore. The other day, I heard someone say the phrase. Have you guys heard this phrase? If you do something in one fell swoop, it means you do it all at once. You just get it all done at one time. Fell swoop. You never see the word fell or really swoop, do you, in any other context? But that phrase, one fell swoop, is still used in English nowadays. So that doesn't relate here, but it's just another example I thought of as I was listening to something the other day. The next word is ultimus haum, which is farthest. It's a superlative word. And for this word, we would get like ultimate would be a good derivative, or maybe ultimatum. Ultimatum is when you tell someone, this must happen or I won't agree or go along. You basically say, this is my absolute requirement, ultimatum. The next word is senex senes, which is old. It's a Latin word for old. It can be used as a substantive sometime to mean like an old guy or an old man. And then I'm going to do the next word with it because the derivatives are the same. Senior, which is older. Older, it's comparative, so this is a comparative of senex. Some derivatives for these words would be like senior, right? That's a word we use in English to describe someone who's older. And also senile would be another derivative, senile. The next word is the first noun we've had so far. These words have mostly been adjectives. I think all have been adjectives so far, but plus plurus is the first noun. I'll describe to you in more detail how this word is used, but it also means more. It's a noun that means more. So more of something is how this noun will be used, but I'll go into more detail once we get into the grammar. A derivative here would be like plus, right? Plus like we use in English. Medius means middle of. Medius aum, that's an adjective. And derivatives from this would be like mediate. If I get in the middle of two people, I'm going to kind of mediate their disagreement. Also, median is like in the sequence of numbers, the median is kind of the middle, the thing in the middle, right? Median. So that's a few derivatives. The word natu means by birth. It's going to be used in a specific phrase here in just a second. You can see it right here. But a derivative from natu, by birth, would be the word natal. Natal means having to do with birth, N-A-T-A-L. So if a woman is, let's say, prenatal, it means she hasn't given birth yet. It's before the birth has happened, prenatal. Prope is a preposition. That's why it takes the accusative. You can see that right here. So it's a preposition with the accusative, and it means near, nearly, or almost. So as far as I can remember, this is the only preposition we've had here. And I'm trying to think of a good derivative for this word. So a word from this could be propinquity, which is not a common everyday word, but a word I just thought of. Propinquity means like a closeness to someone. So that's a word that could come from this. Also, approach is a word you can see coming from prope, approach. And finally, maximus natu. Now, this word is kind of not a really vocab word per se, but it's more of an idiom or phrase, but I want to put it in here so you can study it. Maximus natu means, well, we've seen both these words. Maximus means greatest, and natu means by birth. Greatest by birth is another way of saying oldest. This is how the Romans would say oldest. So if he is the oldest man in the Senate, maximus natu. So it's kind of more of an idiom than anything else, but I did want to put it on the Quizlet so you can be studying this. Now, as you can see, there is some good vocab to learn here. This is what most of the chapter on. This chapter is the words that are the most irregular. So there's not really a formula to figure out how to do the comparative, but rather there's a little more memorization in this chapter than the last two chapters. So you want to start the vocab nice and early for this chapter. Tomorrow I'll be back to explain a few more grammatical details and stuff in this chapter, but even if you start today just learning this new vocabulary and being comfortable with it and studying and doing your Quizlet and everything, that'll be a huge help to the chapter. Okay? Come see me during my office hours if any of these words you have a question on or something that makes sense what I was talking about, and I'll be back tomorrow to tell you guys more about chapter 35 and about the grammar for this chapter. Okay? Hope you guys have an excellent Monday, and I will check in with you tomorrow. Walete.